Marcus Sullivan's hand froze on the brass handle of the executive break room door, his mind 3 steps behind what his eyes were processing. The scene unfolding 15 feet away made no biological sense, violated every professional boundary he'd absorbed in his 28 years, and yet possessed an unsettling clarity that punched through his exhaustion like ice water. Sarah Whitmore sat in the leather recliner positioned beside floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the San Francisco Bay. Her charcoal Armani blazer, the one she'd worn during this morning's all-hands meeting, where she'd announced 23% revenue growth, lay draped across the armrests like shed armor. The silk blouse beneath hung open, and Tyler Marcus's 8-month-old son nursed against her bare breast with an intensity that rewired every assumption Marcus held about reality. The CEO of Apex Systems, the woman Forbes called the Ice Queen of Silicon Valley, feeding his child. Sarah's mascara had carved dark rivers down her cheeks, pooling at her jawline in thick smears that spoke of tears shed before Marcus arrived. Her eyes lifted slowly, locking onto his without disturbing Tyler, without breaking the rhythm of the baby's desperate feeding. The vulnerability in her expression existed in a different universe from the calculated precision she'd displayed 2 hours earlier when she'd eviscerated a junior product manager's quarterly projections. Her lips barely moved, the words emerging, broken and raw. "Please close the door. Lock it. I forgot to lock it." Marcus's hand found the handle through muscle memory alone. His conscious brain remained stuck processing the impossible tableau, his boss several layers of management above him cradling his son, while milk, actual breast milk, sustained the baby, who'd been slowly starving for 8 months. The lock clicked. The sound echoed in the silence like a gunshot, sealing them into this moment. Tyler's small hands clutched at the fabric of Sarah's blouse, with the focused desperation of someone who'd finally found what they had been searching for since birth. His eyes had drifted closed, long lashes resting against cheeks that looked less hollow than they had this morning. The contentment radiating from his tiny body contradicted every medical reality Marcus understood. 20 minutes earlier, Marcus had been drowning in code at his desk on the 15th floor. 3 Red Bull cans formed an aluminum graveyard beside his keyboard, 2 crushed, 1 still sweating, condensation onto the laminate surface. His monitor displayed 47 errors remaining in the legacy system integration that should have taken an hour but had stretched into its 4th because the API endpoints kept throwing exceptions nobody on the team could explain. The delivery deadline sat 5 hours away, immovable as gravity. The sales team had promised the client a demo tomorrow morning at 9. Missing that deadline meant getting added to the quarterly reduction spreadsheet, and Marcus couldn't afford to lose his job. Not with Tyler, not as a single father navigating San Francisco's brutal cost of living on a mid-level engineer salary. Tyler had been with Jessica from the UX team, probably chewing on one of those silicone teething rings while she sketched wireframes for the mobile redesign. Marcus had allowed himself to sink into the zone where code became the only reality that mattered, where semicolons and bracket placement blocked out the constant low-grade panic that had hummed beneath his consciousness for 8 months. David Brennan had wandered past around 9:15, coffee mug in hand, mentioning something about Sarah taking Tyler upstairs. The words had registered at surface level, only filed away as background noise, while Marcus wrestled with a particularly nasty database query that kept timing out. Sarah Whitmore taking his baby to the 20th floor hadn't triggered any alarms. Tyler had become the unofficial mascot of the engineering divisions over the past 2 months, passed between developers like a good luck charm during crunch periods. People who spent 16 hours staring at screens welcomed the excuse to interact with something small and warm and human. The baby provided a socially acceptable reason to stand up, walk around coo nonsense syllables, and pretend for 5 minutes that life existed beyond pull requests and sprint retrospectives. But Sarah Whitmore was different. Sarah Whitmore had built Apex from a seed-funded startup in a Palo Alto garage into a unicorn that dominated the enterprise software space with ruthless efficiency. She'd fired 300 people in a single day when the Series C funding fell through her expression as neutral as someone reading stock tickers. Board meetings bent to her will through strategic brilliance that bordered on prescient. The quarterly earnings calls she conducted possessed the warmth of someone reciting phone book entries. Marcus had never spoken directly to her. Not once in 24 months. 8 layers of management separated a senior engineer from the CEO, and Those layers existed for reasons that seemed self-evident in the organizational chart printed on every conference room wall. The realization that something had gone profoundly wrong had arrived, gradually building through observations that accumulated into dread. 30 minutes had passed since David's casual mention, then 45. When Marcus finally extracted himself from the code long enough to check on Tyler, Jessica said she'd handed the baby to Michelle 15 minutes ago. Michelle hadn't seen Tyler in the last 20 minutes, thought maybe David had him. David was in a code review meeting. The chain of casual custody that usually worked perfectly had suddenly revealed its gaps like a safety net made of rotted rope. Marcus's chest had constricted as he moved through the floor, asking increasingly urgent questions that all led nowhere until someone mentioned seeing Sarah head toward the executive elevator with Tyler sleeping against her shoulder. The executive elevator required a key card Marcus didn't possess, but the stairwell worked fine even if it meant climbing 5 flights, with his heart rate spiking not from exertion, but from certainty that something terrible had occurred. The 20th floor existed as sacred territory reserved for C-suite offices and conference rooms, where acquisition deals got hammered out over catered lunches that cost more than Marcus spent on groceries in a month. He'd never set foot here before today, had never needed to because his world existed in the concrete realm of API endpoints and data structures, not strategic vision and shareholder value. The executive assistant stationed outside Sarah's office had been on the phone, barely glancing up as Marcus moved past. He'd followed the sound of silence to the break room at the end of the hall, expecting to find Tyler asleep in a portable crib or maybe crying while Sarah tried unsuccessfully to soothe him. Not this. Never this. Now standing with his back against the locked door while his son nursed from his CEO's breast, Marcus experienced cognitive dissonance so profound it felt hallucinogenic. This couldn't be happening because it violated every professional boundary, every social norm, every assumption about how the corporate world operated. But Tyler's body told a different story. The way he'd latched onto Sarah with the desperation of someone who'd been searching for exactly this for months. The satisfaction visible in his relaxed limbs, the occasional small sound of contentment that Marcus had never heard during 8 months of rejected formula bottles. The minutes stretched into something elastic and strange, time behaving differently in this room where normal rules clearly didn't apply. Marcus should have been angry, should have been calculating how to report this to HR, whether California law made this kidnapping or assault or some category his exhausted mind couldn't name. Instead, he felt a collision of emotions so tangled he couldn't separate them into discrete threads. Shock, yes. Confusion, absolutely. But underneath ran something else, a desperate recognition that his son looked more content than Marcus had ever witnessed, more fundamentally satisfied. The biological impossibility of what he was observing finally penetrated his shock enough to form words, though they emerged hoarse and uncertain. How is this even happening? Sarah took several deep breaths before responding, her voice raw in ways that suggested she'd been crying long before Marcus opened the door. Let him finish, then I'll explain everything. I promise you'll understand. She paused, fresh tears tracking through the mascara ruins. Or at least I hope you will, because I know how this looks and I know what you must be thinking. Marcus waited, sliding slowly down the door until he sat on polished hardwood that probably cost more per square foot than his monthly rent. He watched the impossible scene continue while his mind spun through scenarios and explanations that all fell apart under the weight of reality. Sarah was his boss, technically several layers removed, but still in his chain of command. Sarah was 42 years old according to her Wikipedia page, which he'd read when Apex's IPO made national news 3 years ago. Sarah was the ice queen profiled in Forbes and Fast Company, and Bloomberg always photographed in severe black suits, with dark hair pulled into a bun so tight it looked painful, never smiling, never revealing anything beyond calculated corporate messaging. This version of Sarah Whitmore existed in a completely different universe, vulnerable and broken, and doing something so intimate that Marcus felt like a voyeur just by being present. Tyler's nursing slowed after another 10 minutes, his small body gradually relaxing into the boneless satisfaction of a completely satiated infant. Sarah adjusted her hold carefully, supporting his head with practiced ease that suggested she'd done this before, and Marcus filed that observation away, along with all the other impossible data points accumulating in his shell-shocked brain. She kept one hand cupped behind Tyler's skull while using the other to fix her blouse movements, economical and unself-conscious. Marcus found himself looking away, even though the moment for modesty had passed somewhere around the time he'd watched his son nurse from a woman who wasn't his mother. When Sarah finally spoke, her voice carried the careful control of someone trying to hold together something that wanted desperately to shatter. This was the most important thing that ever happened to me. What just occurred in this room? I need you to understand that before anything else, before you call security or HR or whoever you're already planning to call. Marcus shifted against the door, his back aching from the awkward position, but he couldn't seem to move, couldn't break the strange gravity of this moment. I'm not calling anyone yet. I just need to understand what the hell is going on. Sarah looked down at Tyler sleeping in her arms, peaceful in ways Marcus recognized from the early days after Keisha died when his mother had flown out from Baltimore and somehow gotten the baby to sleep for 4-hour stretches, despite Marcus's complete inability to manage more than 20 minutes before Tyler woke screaming. Whatever had just happened had produced the kind of deep, satisfied sleep that only came when a baby's most fundamental needs had been met. Marcus couldn't ignore that evidence, even as every other part of his brain insisted this situation demanded immediate action. I lost my daughter last week. Sarah's words emerged flat and dead despite the tears that hadn't stopped falling. Her name was Emma. I made it to 18 weeks this time before my body decided it couldn't support life. Fourth pregnancy loss in 6 years. The information landed like a physical blow, recontextualizing everything Marcus thought he knew about the woman holding his child. Sarah Whitmore had always seemed more like a force of nature than an actual human being, someone who existed on a different plane where normal concerns about relationships and family and biological imperatives didn't apply. The idea that she'd been carrying grief this massive while running a multi-hundred-million-dollar company, while firing people and closing deals and projecting absolute confidence in quarterly earnings calls seemed impossible. Until Marcus remembered his own journey through the last 8 months, how he'd coded through funerals and debugged through nightmares and somehow kept showing up to work even when getting out of bed felt like climbing Everest. I didn't know. The words felt inadequate for the moment, hollow and useless. Nobody knew. Nobody knows anything about me beyond what Forbes publishes. Sarah's voice had gone brittle, each word carefully placed like she was walking across ice that might crack. I've made sure of that. Kept every personal detail locked down, because showing weakness in this industry gets you destroyed, gets you replaced by the board with someone younger and hungrier and willing to work 100 hours a week without the distraction of wanting things that normal people want. She shifted Tyler slightly, her movements gentle and practiced, and Marcus noticed for the first time how naturally she held him, how her body had adapted to accommodate his weight without conscious thought. The pregnancy hormones are still in my system. My body prepared for a baby that isn't coming. Produced milk for a child I'll never feed. Her voice cracked on the last word. When I picked up Tyler this morning, when he started fussing in that specific way babies do, when they're hungry, something happened that I didn't plan or anticipate. The oxytocin flooded my system so fast I actually felt dizzy. And suddenly my breasts were letting down milk, and Tyler was rooting against my chest with this desperate urgency, and I acted on instinct instead of logic. Came up here, locked the door, and gave him what he was asking for. The clinical explanation somehow made the situation feel more surreal, rather than less like Sarah was describing someone else's actions, some other woman who had crossed every conceivable line between appropriate and catastrophic. Marcus tried to organize his thoughts into coherent responses, but everything kept fragmenting against the image of Tyler nursing, with that desperate intensity against the knowledge that his son had just received something Marcus had assumed was lost forever when Keisha died on that operating table, while doctors shouted codes and nurses ran for equipment that arrived seconds too late. How long were you planning to do this without telling me? The question emerged harsher than Marcus intended. Sharp enough that Sarah flinched, but he couldn't quite regret the tone because anger was starting to break through the shock, righteous fury at the violation, even if the outcome had clearly benefited Tyler in ways Marcus couldn't deny. I wasn't planning anything. Sarah's volume increased, the CEO voice breaking through for the first time. This wasn't calculated or premeditated. I picked up your son because he was crying and everyone else was busy, and my body responded in a way I couldn't control. And suddenly we were here, and it was happening, and I couldn't make myself stop because it felt like the universe was giving me one moment, one single moment to experience what I've been trying to achieve for 6 years through IVF and miscarriages and fertility specialists who keep finding new ways to tell me my body's broken. The rawness in Sarah's voice cut through Marcus's anger, exposing something underneath that looked a lot like his own grief, his own desperate scrambling to find meaning in loss that seemed senseless and cruel. Keisha had been 26 years old, healthy, excited about motherhood in that cautious way people have when they have watched friends struggle through complications and stillbirths. The pregnancy had been textbook perfect, every checkup confirming that mother and baby were thriving, right up until the moment Keisha's blood pressure spiked during labor, and the doctor started using words like eclampsia and cerebral hemorrhage and catastrophic. Marcus had held his son for the first time while his wife died 6 feet away, had felt Tyler's tiny fingers curl around his thumb while monitors flatline, and a doctor he'd never met before delivered the information that would detonate his entire life. 8 months later, he was still figuring out how to exist in the aftermath, still learning to breathe through the moments when grief ambushed him in grocery store aisles, or during code reviews, or at 3 in the morning when Tyler woke crying for a mother who would never come. The idea that Sarah Whitmore carried her own version of that devastation, had been functioning at the highest levels of corporate leadership while bleeding internally from losses nobody else could see, created an unexpected bridge between them that had nothing to do with org charts or pay grades. "I need to take him to the pediatrician." Marcus heard himself say it, the words emerging from some part of his brain still capable of practical thinking. "We have an appointment at 2. Dr. Morrison's been worried about his weight about the formula rejection. I don't know what to tell her about this." Sarah nodded slowly, carefully transferring Tyler to Marcus's arms without waking him. The loss that crossed her face when the baby left her embrace was so profound Marcus had to look away. She stood with visible effort, reaching for her blazer, transforming back into the CEO with each breath, even though her eyes remained red and her mascara had created dark smears along her cheekbones. "Tell him the truth. Tell him a woman who recently miscarried, was holding your son, and experienced spontaneous lactation due to hormone fluctuations. Tell him that your son nursed for approximately 35 minutes and fell into the deepest sleep you've seen in months. Tell him whatever medical facts are relevant to his care." Marcus rose as well, cradling Tyler against his chest while reaching for the door lock with his free hand. The baby's weight felt different, somehow more substantial, as if those 35 minutes had added density to his small frame. "We're going to have to talk about this again, about all of this, because I still don't understand what just happened or what it means or what the hell I'm supposed to do with this information." Sarah met his eyes for a long moment, her expression settling back into the controlled mask Marcus recognized from company meetings, though something in her gaze remained raw and exposed. "I know, and I'll answer whatever questions you have, explain anything you need explained. But right now, take care of your son, make sure he's healthy. That's what matters." The drive to Dr. Morrison's office passed in a blur of San Francisco traffic and racing thoughts that refused to organize into coherent patterns. Marcus kept glancing at the rearview mirror, watching Tyler sleep in the car seat with that same profound contentment, occasionally checking to make sure this was real and not some stress-induced hallucination brought on by too many energy drinks and too little sleep. The appointment had been scheduled for weeks, another in the long series of increasingly worried visits, where Dr. Morrison documented Tyler's failure to thrive, where percentile charts showed downward trajectories, and the specter of hospitalization loomed closer with each weigh-in that came back below expectations. Dr. Robert Morrison had delivered hundreds of babies during his 35 years at UCSF Benioff Children's Hospital, had seen every variation of feeding difficulty and failure to thrive. But his expression when Marcus explained what had happened suggested this particular scenario was new territory, even for someone with his experience. He listened without interrupting while Marcus laid out the facts in chronological order, starting with finding Tyler missing from the 15th floor and ending with Sarah's explanation about miscarriage and spontaneous lactation. Marcus tried to keep his voice clinical and detached, even though the story felt insane coming out of his own mouth. "And you're certain it was actual breastfeeding, not bottle feeding with expressed milk or formula." Dr. Morrison removed his wire-rimmed glasses, cleaning them with methodical precision that suggested he was buying time to formulate a response. I saw it with my own eyes. There was no bottle involved. It was direct nursing. And Tyler latched on like he'd been doing it his entire life instead of being exclusively formula-fed since birth. Dr. Morrison's office had photographs on the walls showing him at various stages of his career, starting as a young resident in Philadelphia and progressing through decades of practice that eventually brought him to California to this pediatrics clinic where Marcus had been bringing Tyler since week 2 when the first formula experiments began failing. The medical facts are straightforward enough, Doctor. Morrison replaced his glasses and pulled up Tyler's chart on the computer. Women who experience late-term pregnancy loss can indeed produce milk due to sustained hormone levels, particularly if they were in the second trimester or beyond. The letdown reflex can be triggered by proximity to an infant, especially one actively seeking to nurse. From a nutritional standpoint, breast milk is incomparably superior to any formula on the market, which is why the American Academy of Pediatrics recommends exclusive breastfeeding for at least 6 months whenever possible. Marcus heard the clinical information, processed it on an intellectual level, but his emotional response remained tangled and confused. But this isn't my wife breastfeeding our son. This is my boss, someone I don't know beyond professional interactions, someone who just did something that feels like it should be illegal or at minimum completely inappropriate. Doctor. Morrison leaned back in his chair, his expression shifting from clinical to something more personal, more grounded in the messy realities that medical textbooks didn't adequately address. Wet nursing has existed throughout human history, Marcus. It was standard practice for centuries, continues to be common in many cultures today. The taboo around it is relatively recent and largely cultural rather than medical. From where I sit looking at Tyler's chart and the concerning trajectory we've been tracking for months, what happened today might have been the single most nutritious and beneficial experience of his entire life so far. The words landed with unexpected weight, reframing the situation in ways Marcus hadn't considered while standing in that 20th floor break room watching his CEO cry. He'd been thinking about boundaries and appropriateness and what HR would say, not about the simple biological fact that his son had just received exactly what his body had been desperately seeking for 8 months of frustrated formula rejection. He's never nursed this well before. Marcus admitted it quietly, looking down at Tyler's peaceful face. Keisha died before she could even try breastfeeding. We went straight to formula in the hospital, and it's been a nightmare ever since. 4 different brands, 3 different bottle types, consultations with lactation specialists who had no solutions because there was no breast milk to work with. Watching him refuse food over and over while his weight dropped has been killing me slowly. And today he nursed for half an hour like it was the most natural thing in the world. Doctor. Morrison pulled up the growth charts pointing to the curve that showed Tyler hovering just above the 5th percentile for weight, dangerously close to the threshold where hospitalization became necessary. However, Marcus, before you even consider allowing this to continue, I need the following from this woman. Dr. Morrison's voice took on the authoritative tone that made parents listen. Full STD panel, HIV, hepatitis B and C, syphilis, CMV, all within the last 2 weeks. Drug screening for any medications or substances in her system. Complete medical history, including autoimmune diseases, chronic infections, tuberculosis. Clearance from her OBGYN confirming she's healthy enough to lactate. And legal documentation. California has specific laws about informed consent for wet nursing. The list felt overwhelming, transforming what had seemed like a simple biological event into a complex medical intervention, requiring due diligence Marcus hadn't even considered. You need to understand the risks. Dr. Morrison leaned forward, making sure Marcus was paying attention. If Tyler becomes dependent on this woman's breast milk and her supply suddenly stops because of illness or hormone changes or stress, you'll be back at square one. Except worse, because now Tyler knows what breast milk tastes like and may reject formula even harder than before. This isn't like switching formula brands. This is creating a biological dependency on another human being's body. Marcus sat in silence for 10 seconds, processing implications that spiraled in every direction. But if it works, if Tyler thrives, isn't that worth the risk? Dr. Morrison's expression softened slightly. That's not a medical question, Marcus. That's a father's question. And only you can answer it. He paused, choosing his words carefully. From a purely medical perspective, if this woman is healthy, if she's willing, and if you can sustain it, this could solve Tyler's feeding crisis and give him the nutritional foundation he desperately needs. The question isn't whether breast milk would benefit him, because the answer to that is unequivocal. The question is whether you're comfortable with the arrangement given the personal and professional complexities. Marcus stood pacing to the window that overlooked the hospital parking lot, watching cars navigate through the mid-afternoon traffic, while his brain tried to process information that seemed designed to short-circuit normal decision-making processes. Sarah Whitmore had just offered his son something irreplaceable, had given Tyler access to nutrition his body desperately needed through an act that was simultaneously generous and boundary-violating, selfless and strange. The fact that it had emerged from her own grief and loss made it more complicated rather than less added layers of emotional entanglement that Marcus couldn't begin to untangle while standing in a pediatrician's office trying to figure out if his son was healthy or if this bizarre situation had just created new problems to replace the old ones. I need to talk to her again. Need to understand if this was a one-time thing driven by hormones and grief, or if there's something more happening here that I should be aware of. Dr. Morrison nodded, making notes in Tyler's chart that would document this appointment in ways that would probably baffle any future doctors who reviewed the records. Whatever you decide, make sure Tyler continues getting adequate nutrition. His development depends on it. The feeding difficulties we've been tracking aren't sustainable long-term. Something needs to change, whether that's finding a formula that works or exploring alternative options. The afternoon stretched into evening as Marcus returned to his Mission District apartment, a two-bedroom unit that cost $2,900 a month and felt simultaneously too expensive and too small. Tyler's gear occupied every available surface: the swing in the living room, the portable crib near the couch, the changing table crammed into the nursery bottles and formula containers cluttering the kitchen counters. Photographs of Keisha still hung on the walls because Marcus hadn't found the emotional bandwidth to take them down. Their wedding photo above the couch. Keisha holding newborn Tyler in the hospital, smiling despite the exhaustion 6 minutes before the first seizure. Pictures that had become shrines to a life that ended before it properly began. Marcus called his mother in Baltimore, putting the phone on speaker while he changed Tyler's diaper, needing to hear someone else's voice confirm that he wasn't losing his mind. Maggie Sullivan had raised 3 sons as a single mother in Baltimore's rougher neighborhoods, had worked double shifts as a labor and delivery nurse to keep food on the table, and Marcus in the magnet school that eventually earned him a scholarship to Berkeley. She'd seen him through Keisha's death, had flown out despite her heart condition, and stayed for 6 weeks helping with Tyler, while Marcus learned to function through grief. Her voice on the phone carried that particular tone of maternal concern that suggested she already knew something was wrong before Marcus said a word. "Baby, you sound exhausted. What's happening?" Marcus told her everything, the words spilling out in a confused rush that probably didn't make much sense, but captured the essential insanity of the day. He expected shock, maybe disapproval, possibly anger at this woman who had crossed lines without permission. What he got instead was silence, the kind of thoughtful quiet that meant his mother was actually processing instead of reacting, considering the situation from angles Marcus hadn't thought to examine. "You know, your grandmother fed half the neighborhood babies back in the day." Maggie's voice carried memories of a South Carolina childhood Marcus only knew through stories. Women helped each other raise children because that's what community meant. If your milk came in and your neighbor's baby was hungry while she was at work, you fed that child. Nobody thought twice about it because survival mattered more than whose breast the baby was latched to. Marcus hadn't expected that response, hadn't anticipated his mother reaching for a cultural memory that predated modern anxieties about appropriate boundaries. "That was a different time, Mama. This is my boss. We're talking about the CEO of the company. There are power dynamics and professional concerns and 100 reasons why this could explode in my face." Maggie's laugh came dry and knowing, carrying decades of navigating white corporate America as a Black woman who'd climbed from candy striper to head nurse through sheer persistence. "Baby, I understand power dynamics better than you think. Spent 37 years delivering babies at Hopkins and watched plenty of complicated situations. I also understand that your son has been slowly starving for 8 months while you tried every solution modern medicine could offer. This woman just gave Tyler something you couldn't provide, something his body desperately needed. And she did it from her own grief and loss. That's not power dynamics. That's grace showing up when you least expected. The words hit harder than Marcus wanted to admit, exposing the fear underneath his concerns about appropriateness, the shame he'd been carrying about failing to solve Tyler's feeding crisis through acceptable channels. He was supposed to be the provider, the protector, the father who could handle everything, even when everything felt impossible. Accepting help from his CEO, from a woman he barely knew, from someone whose own pain had somehow intersected with his son's needs, felt like admitting defeat in ways Marcus wasn't ready to process. What if she's not stable? What if this is some grief reaction that passes and leaves Tyler dependent on something that disappears? Maggie's voice softened, taking on that particular quality she used when Marcus was being stubborn about something he needed to hear. Then you figure it out the same way you've been figuring everything else out. But right now, today, your son is sleeping peacefully for the first time in months. That's not nothing, Marcus. That's everything. Don't let pride or fear or professional concerns stop you from accepting a blessing just because it comes wrapped in uncomfortable packaging. After the call ended, Marcus sat in the growing darkness of his apartment, Tyler asleep in the crib beside the couch, and tried to imagine what came next. Going back to Sarah meant crossing a threshold that couldn't be uncrossed, meant entering into an arrangement that existed outside every category of relationship he understood. At 6 o'clock, his phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "This is Sarah Whitmore. I obtained your contact information from HR records. I have the medical documentation Dr. Morrison would require. If you're willing to discuss this further, I can come to your residence this evening at a time that works for you. I understand if your answer is no." SW, Marcus stared at the message for 3 full minutes, watching the cursor blink in the reply field while his thumb hovered over the keyboard. Every rational part of his brain screamed that this was insane, that he should decline politely and find some other solution to Tyler's feeding problems, that getting entangled with his CEO in this way would end badly no matter how pure the intentions. But Tyler had nursed for 35 minutes today and slept for 4 hours straight afterward, the longest stretch in 2 months. And Marcus was so desperately tired of watching his son suffer, so exhausted from the constant cycle of rejected bottles and weight checks that brought nothing but bad news. He typed a response. 6:30 p.m. Addresses below. Please bring all medical records. Sarah arrived at 6:28, standing in the hallway outside his door with the tentative posture of someone entering completely foreign territory. She'd changed from the severe black suit into dark jeans and a simple cashmere sweater, her hair down for the first time Marcus had ever witnessed, falling past her shoulders in waves that made her look younger and somehow more vulnerable. The transformation from Ice Queen CEO to nervous woman about to cross an intimate threshold was so complete that Marcus almost didn't recognize her when he opened the door. "Come in. Tyler's been fussy for the last hour. I think he knows you're coming." Sarah stepped into the cramped living room, taking in the space with eyes that probably compared it automatically to whatever penthouse she inhabited. Marcus's apartment was clean, but cluttered with the accumulated chaos of single fatherhood baby gear occupying every available surface, laundry folded on the couch because the bedroom was too small for proper organization. She didn't comment on the modest surroundings, just set her bag down carefully and held out her arms when Tyler started reaching for her with urgent little sounds that weren't quite crying, but suggested he'd get there soon if his needs went unmet. The transition was immediate and striking. Tyler settled against Sarah's chest, rooting with the same desperate focus Marcus had witnessed yesterday, and within seconds he'd latched on and begun nursing with intensity that suggested his body remembered exactly what had happened in that 20th floor break room. Sarah sank into the rocking chair Marcus had positioned by the window, her entire frame relaxing as Tyler fed. Marcus busied himself in the kitchen area, pretending to clean dishes that were already clean, because watching this felt too intimate despite having agreed to the arrangement. They didn't speak for the first 20 minutes. Sarah focused entirely on Tyler, while Marcus moved between kitchen and living room with manufactured tasks that kept his hands busy. The silence wasn't uncomfortable, exactly more like the cautious quiet of two people navigating new territory without a map, figuring out boundaries through trial and error rather than explicit discussion. Eventually, Marcus ran out of things to pretend to organize and settled on the couch with his laptop pulling up code reviews that needed completion before tomorrow's stand-up meeting. You can relax. Sarah's voice came low to avoid disturbing Tyler. I know this is strange, but we might as well accept that strange is our new normal. Marcus closed the laptop, accepting that productive work wasn't happening while his CEO nursed his son 15 feet away. Before we go any further, I need to see the medical documentation. Dr. Morrison was very clear about what's required. Sarah shifted slightly, adjusting Tyler's position with practiced ease that suggested muscle memory was building faster than conscious skill. I brought everything. The folder is in my bag, the black leather one by the door. Full STD panel dated last Friday, all negative. Clearance letter from my OBGYN. Complete medication list. Medical history going back 6 years. Marcus retrieved the folder, spreading the documents across the coffee table. The STD panel results showed negative for HIV, hepatitis B, and the syphilis, CMV antibodies indicating past infection, but no active disease. The OBGYN clearance letter, signed by a Dr. Patricia Walsh at UCSF Women's Health, confirmed Sarah was medically cleared for lactation following pregnancy loss with no contraindications. The medication list was surprisingly short. Prenatal vitamins she apparently still took, despite the miscarriage, fenugreek supplements to maintain milk supply, ibuprofen as needed. No prescription medications, no recreational drugs, no alcohol consumption, noted for the past 6 years. The medical history documented what Sarah had told him: 4 pregnancies ending in loss at progressively later gestational ages. The clinical language couldn't quite mask the tragedy embedded in phrases like blighted ovum at 8 weeks and incompatible with life and placental abruption. You came prepared. Marcus couldn't keep the surprise out of his voice. Sarah looked up from Tyler, meeting his eyes directly. I built a company from 2 million to 280 million in 12 years. When I commit to something, I commit completely. Due diligence is what I do. The statement reminded Marcus of who he was dealing with: not just a grieving mother, but someone who'd clawed her way to the top of Silicon Valley through strategic thinking and ruthless execution. That version of Sarah hadn't disappeared just because she was currently nursing his son. It had simply expanded to encompass new territory. If we do this, Marcus heard himself say, testing the words as they emerged, it can't be here at the office where people will see and speculate and turn it into something it's not. And we need to be honest about what this is and what it isn't. Clear boundaries, legal documentation, an exit strategy if things go wrong. Sarah nodded slowly, her expression shifting into something that looked like relief. I understand. We'll need a written agreement. Schedule confidentiality terms, termination rights. I can draft something and have my lawyer review it, or you can have yours look at it first if you prefer. I'll draft it. Marcus surprised himself with the decisiveness. I did pre-law at Berkeley before switching to computer science. Nothing fancy, but enough to put together a basic contract that covers the essentials. They spent the next hour negotiating terms like they were planning a product launch instead of formalizing an arrangement that would probably get them both fired if HR discovered the truth. Sarah would come by at 6 each evening, stay for however long Tyler needed leave before the situation could drift into territories that complicated an already impossible arrangement. They would maintain complete professionalism at the office, no special treatment, no acknowledgement of what was happening outside work hours. If questions arose, they would handle them honestly, but carefully protecting both Tyler's well-being and their own privacy. By the time Marcus finished typing the agreement on his laptop, darkness had settled over San Francisco completely, the city lights creating patterns that stretched toward distant hills. Sarah had moved to the couch after Tyler finished nursing and fell asleep, and now she read over Marcus's shoulder as he added the final clauses. This works. She scrolled through the document one more time. Simple, clear, protects both parties. I'll sign it now if you want, or we can wait until you've had time to think it over. Now, Marcus heard the certainty in his own voice. Before I second-guessed myself into paralysis. They both signed using the trackpad signature feature, Marcus printing 2 copies on his ancient inkjet printer that wheezed through the pages like it was dying. Each took 1 copy, and just like that, they'd formalized the strangest agreement of Marcus's life. Sarah gathered her things at 7:50, careful not to wake Tyler, who slept in the portable crib with the profound stillness of complete satisfaction. Same time tomorrow, her voice carried a question, despite the confidence. Marcus looked at Tyler sleeping peacefully, then back at Sarah standing by the door with her bag and her signed contract, and her eyes that still showed traces of mascara damage from this morning's crying. Yeah, Tyler will be waiting. And Marcus, she paused with her hand on the doorknob. Thank you for trusting me with him. Thank you for saving him. I was out of options. After Sarah left, Marcus sat in the rocking chair that still held warmth from her body, looking at Tyler sleeping in the portable crib. The baby's chest rose and fell with reliable rhythm, his face peaceful in ways Marcus hadn't seen since before Keisha died. Marcus whispered to the sleeping infant, "Your mama would want you to survive, buddy. Even if it means accepting help from someone we don't really know, even if it changes everything." He looked at the family photo on the wall, Keisha holding newborn Tyler Marcus, with his arm around her, all three smiling in that hospital room, 6 minutes before the world ended. The image felt both impossibly distant and painfully immediate, a reminder of everything he'd lost and everything he still had left to protect. Tomorrow, Sarah would come back. And the day after that, and probably the day after that too, until Tyler's body no longer needed what hers could provide, or until the arrangement collapsed under its own weight, or until something neither of them could predict intervened. But tonight, Tyler slept peacefully for the first time in 8 months. And that simple fact mattered more than organizational charts, or power dynamics, or concerns about what other people might think if they knew. Marcus carried that thought into his own bedroom, where exhaustion finally claimed him around midnight. His last conscious awareness was gratitude, messy and complicated, entangled with a dozen other emotions, but gratitude nonetheless. For the first time since Keisha died, something had gone right. The pattern established itself with mechanical precision over the first 3 weeks. Sarah arrived each evening between 6:05 and 6:10, never earlier, because that would seem eager. Never later, because Tyler's hunger operated on biological clockwork that didn't accommodate traffic or last-minute conference calls. She would knock twice, always. Twice, never three, and Marcus would open the door to find her standing in the hallway with that same tentative posture, like she expected him to change his mind and send her away. By day 3, Tyler recognized her footsteps in the hallway. His head would turn toward the door seconds before the knock came, small body tensing, with anticipation that bordered on desperation. The recognition troubled Marcus in ways he couldn't articulate, this evidence that his son's biology had rewired itself around a woman who wasn't family, wasn't permanent, wasn't guaranteed to stay. Day 5 brought the first measurable proof that this arrangement exceeded simple sustenance. Marcus weighed Tyler on the home scale he'd purchased from Amazon during one of those 3 a.m. panic shopping sessions, the kind where exhaustion and desperation convinced you that the right piece of equipment would solve everything. 17 pounds 4 ounces. 4 ounces gained since Tuesday. Impossible rate for formula, barely possible, even for exclusively breastfed infants, and yet the scale didn't lie even when Marcus stepped off and recalibrated and weighed Tyler again to confirm. Saturday evening arrived with Sarah appearing at 6:07, despite it being the weekend, despite having no professional obligation to maintain the schedule. Marcus had coffee ready this time, black. No sugar, extra hot, the way he'd noticed she took it from the Keurig machine in the 20th floor break room during that one all-hands meeting where everyone had congregated afterward for the Q&A session. She accepted the mug with surprise flickering across her features before the CEO mask reasserted itself. They sat in awkward silence while Tyler nursed Sarah in the rocking chair and Marcus on the couch pretending to review pull requests on his laptop. The quiet felt different from the purposeful silence of that first evening, less charged with shock, more weighted with questions neither of them knew how to ask. Sarah broke it first. How old was Keisha when she died? The question landed like something physical, unexpected, not in its content, but in the fact that Sarah had asked it at all, had acknowledged the existence of the woman whose photograph still covered Marcus's walls. 26. We were married 11 months, together 14 months total. I'm sorry, me too. The exchange felt inadequate for the magnitude of loss it referenced. But what words could possibly be adequate? Marcus had learned that grief existed in a language that couldn't be spoken, only witnessed. Monday of week 2 brought Dr. Morrison's follow-up appointment, and Marcus arrived at the clinic with Tyler babbling, contentedly in the car seat, actual babbling, not the frustrated crying that had soundtracked every previous visit. The medical assistant, who called them back, did a visible double take when Tyler smiled at her instead of screaming. Dr. Morrison's scale confirmed what Marcus's bathroom scale had suggested: 18 pounds 1 ounce, from 16 pounds 14 ounces a week ago. 19 ounces gained in 7 days. Dr. Morrison removed his glasses, cleaned them, put them back on, and checked the scale calibration before weighing Tyler again. Marcus, this is borderline miraculous. Tyler jumped from 5th percentile to 18th percentile in 1 week. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it. The arrangement is working. More than working, this is the kind of weight gain I dream about seeing in failure to thrive babies. Dr. Morrison clicked through screens on his computer, adding notes that Marcus couldn't read from his angle. How's the woman handling it? She shows up every day, even weekends, very committed. Dr. Morrison's expression shifted into something more serious, the look he wore when delivering news that parents needed to hear, but wouldn't want to. Tyler's body is catching up to where it should be, which is excellent. But I'm going to need to see this woman myself. Wet nursing requires ongoing medical monitoring. I need to examine her, confirm the milk supply is adequate and healthy, make sure she's not developing mastitis or other complications. This isn't optional. The request made sense medically, but it meant bringing Sarah into Dr. Morrison's office meant crossing another boundary in an arrangement already overflowing with them. Marcus texted her that evening after Tyler fell asleep, explaining what the doctor required. Her response came back in under a minute. Of course, I expected this. I'll bring updated medical records. What day works? They scheduled it for the following Tuesday, and Sarah arrived at Dr. Morrison's office with a folder that included monthly STD panels, updated OB/GYN clearance, and documentation from a private lactation consultant she'd hired. The thoroughness impressed even Dr. Morrison. The physical examination happened behind closed doors, while Marcus waited in the reception area with Tyler trying not to imagine what was occurring 15 feet away. When Dr. Morrison called him back in 40 minutes later, Sarah was fully dressed and sitting in the patient chair with the composed expression of someone who just endured something uncomfortable but necessary. Whitmore is remarkably healthy. Dr. Morrison's tone carried professional approval. Milk supply is robust, 28 to 30 ounces per day based on her pumping logs. No signs of infection or complications. She's taking this more seriously than many biological mothers I've worked with. Sarah's cheeks colored slightly at the praise the first time Marcus had seen her visibly affected by a compliment. Dr. Morrison turned to address both of them. From a medical standpoint, you're doing everything right. Tyler is thriving. Miss Whitmore is maintaining her health. I want weekly weight checks for Tyler and monthly follow-ups for Sarah to monitor for any changes or complications. But as of right now, I see no medical reason to discontinue this arrangement. The validation should have felt reassuring. Instead, it solidified something that had been theoretical into concrete reality. This wasn't a temporary emergency measure anymore. This was sustainable. This could continue indefinitely if they wanted it to. That realization hung in the air during the drive back to Marcus's apartment, Sarah following in her Tesla because they'd come separately from work. Tyler dozed in his car seat, and Marcus caught himself glancing in the rearview mirror, not to check on his son, but to see the white Tesla 3 cars behind, to confirm Sarah was still there, still following, still showing up. Week 3 brought an evening that shifted everything. Wednesday, February 10th, Tyler asleep by 7:30, after nursing Marcus and Sarah sitting on opposite ends of the couch with the careful distance of people aware that proximity could complicate an already impossible situation. Sarah broke the silence with words that emerged tentative and raw. I looked up Keisha's birthday. It was yesterday, wasn't it? January 28th. Marcus went very still. He'd forgotten his own wife's birthday for the first time since they'd met, too consumed by work deadlines and Tyler's care to remember the date that used to define how he organized the calendar. Yeah, how did you? Hospital records are public if you know where to look. I thought someone should remember her. The admission landed like absolution for a sin Marcus hadn't known he'd committed. Sarah had remembered Keisha when he hadn't had honored his dead wife through simple acknowledgement. I forgot. The words came out broken. I've been so focused on Tyler and work and this arrangement that I forgot my own wife's birthday. What kind of husband does that make me? Sarah shifted closer, closing some of the distance between them. The kind who's surviving impossible circumstances the only way he knows how. Keisha wouldn't want you drowning in dates and anniversaries. She'd want Tyler thriving, which he is thanks to this arrangement. Marcus felt something crack open in his chest. Grief had been locked down for months, finding an unexpected release. He started crying for the first time since the funeral, shoulders shaking with sobs he couldn't control. Sarah moved to him immediately, pulling him against her shoulder. The way she held Tyler and Marcus let himself break in ways he hadn't allowed since the night Keisha died. He cried for his wife, for the future they'd never have, for the loneliness that had become his constant companion, for the desperate scramble to keep Tyler alive that left no room for properly processing loss. Tyler woke crying from the bedroom, his radar for parental distress somehow functional even in sleep. Sarah released Marcus and went to get the baby, returning to find Marcus wiping his eyes with the heels of his hands. She settled into the rocking chair with Tyler, and the three of them existed in comfortable silence, while the baby nursed back to sleep, while Marcus's breathing steadied, while something fundamental shifted in the space between them. After Sarah transferred Tyler back to his crib, she returned to the couch but sat closer this time, near enough that their legs almost touched. "Thank you," Marcus said quietly, "for remembering her, for letting me fall apart. We're both walking around with holes in our chests where people used to be. Sometimes those holes need to be acknowledged." The vulnerability in Sarah's voice matched his own, and Marcus realized they'd crossed another threshold without discussing it, had moved from transactional arrangement into something that looked a lot like friendship. Week 4 brought the first real professional complication, arriving wrapped in corporate efficiency during Friday's all-hands engineering meeting. Marcus sat in the conference room with 12 other developers, laptop open to the agenda document, when Sarah's face appeared on the video screen from the corporate office downtown. Her expression held the ice-cold neutrality Marcus recognized from quarterly earnings calls, the look that made junior developers shift uncomfortably in their seats. "Project Phoenix deadline is moved up 2 weeks. The client needs deployment by end of month instead of mid-November. This is non-negotiable." Marcus felt the words before he processed them, tension coiling in his shoulders as he calculated what 2 weeks meant: 80-hour weeks, weekend shifts, the kind of death march that defined Silicon Valley crunch culture. His mouth moved before his brain could stop it. "Ms. Whitmore, that's 80-hour weeks for the next 3 weeks. Some of us have family responsibilities." Sarah cut him off with surgical precision, her voice dropping 10 degrees. "Then you manage your time better, Mr. Sullivan. This company doesn't pay you for work-life balance. It pays you to deliver results on deadline. If you can't handle the workload, perhaps we need to discuss your position here." The conference room went silent, 12 engineers collectively holding their breath, while Sarah's words hung in the air like a threat. David Brennan, sitting 2 seats down, whispered just loud enough for Marcus to hear, "Holy shit, she just destroyed you." Marcus kept his expression neutral through sheer force of will, jaw clenched so hard his molars ached. "Understood, Ms. Whitmore. We'll make it work." The meeting continued for another 15 minutes, but Marcus absorbed none of it, his thoughts circling the public humiliation like a toy worrying a bone. She'd eviscerated him in front of his entire team, made him look weak and unprofessional. And for what? To maintain appearances, to prove she wasn't giving him special treatment. By the time 6 o'clock arrived, Marcus's anger had calcified into something cold and sharp. Sarah knocked at 6:08, and he opened the door without the usual greeting, not looking at her as she entered. "Tyler's in the crib. He'll wake up in 5 minutes." Sarah set her bag down slowly, reading the temperature in the room. Marcus about the meeting. He turned on her, then all the rage he'd been containing for 8 hours finding its target. 80-hour weeks. "You know I can't do that. Tyler needs me, and you humiliated me in front of my entire team, publicly disrespected me. Is that the price of this arrangement? I have to accept being treated like garbage at work so you can nurse my son at home." Sarah's voice rose to match his, the CEO composure cracking. "The price you want to talk about price? I'm risking my entire career coming here every night. The least you can do is not make it obvious I'm favoring you. So I'm supposed to just accept being publicly humiliated. That's your solution. If I had given you special treatment, people would have noticed I'm protecting us by being harder on you. Can't you see that?" Tyler started crying from the bedroom, his wails cutting through their argument like an alarm. Sarah moved toward the nursery automatically, but Marcus blocked her path, his body responding to some primitive instinct he didn't fully understand. "No, I'll get him. You're not his mother." The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. Her face went white, then red, then settled into something carefully blank. "You're right." Her voice came out flat, emotionless, the CEO mask fully deployed. "I'm not his mother. I'm just the woman whose body is keeping him alive. I'll wait here." Marcus retrieved Tyler, the baby's cries tapering to hiccups as Marcus held him. But when they returned to the living room, Tyler's arms reached immediately for Sarah, his small body straining toward her with singular focus. Sarah took him without a word, settled into the rocking chair, and within seconds, Tyler had latched on and calmed completely. The silence that filled the apartment felt different from the comfortable quiet of previous evenings. This was sharp-edged and brittle, full of things unsaid. 10 minutes passed before Marcus spoke, his anger drained away, leaving only exhaustion. "You want to be his mother and my girlfriend and my boss who protects me, pick two, Sarah. Nobody can be all three without breaking." Sarah looked up from Tyler, tears tracking down her cheeks, though her voice remained steady. "I'm already breaking, Marcus. Have been for 6 years. I'm just trying to keep the pieces together long enough to do some good before I completely shatter." The admission hung between them raw and true, and Marcus felt his defenses crumble against the honesty of it. They didn't speak for the rest of the evening. Sarah left at 7:50 without saying goodbye, and Marcus spent the night staring at his ceiling, wondering if he'd just destroyed the one thing keeping his son alive. But she came back the next day, and the day after that, and slowly, painfully, they rebuilt whatever fragile thing they'd constructed. The shift happened during week 7, arriving without announcement or fanfare. Sarah started coming earlier, 5:45 instead of 6, helping prepare dinner while waiting for Tyler to wake. They developed a rhythm in Marcus's cramped kitchen, Sarah chopping vegetables while Marcus handled the stove, their movements finding choreography through repetition. They ate together after Tyler nursed and fell asleep, conversations drifting from work, stress, to childhood memories, to the losses that had defined them both. Sarah told him about Detroit, about her father's alcoholism after the Ford plant closed, about learning to code in public libraries because home wasn't safe. Marcus shared Baltimore, the basketball scholarship that saved him from poverty, meeting Keisha in the Highland Hospital ER when he'd broken his wrist during a game. Her gentle teasing while she set his cast, how he had asked her out before they discharged him. "Building a company is like rebuilding a car engine," Sarah said one evening while they cooked pasta together. "You can't skip steps, can't fake the foundation. One loose bolt and the whole thing explodes." Marcus recognized the analogy, the way Sarah processed the world through mechanical metaphors that made sense to someone who'd taught herself programming. Loving Keisha was like playing defense in basketball, he found himself saying. You commit fully knowing you might get hurt, but you do it anyway because the alternative is sitting on the bench watching life happen. The vulnerability they offered each other felt both dangerous and necessary, like they were teaching each other a language neither had spoken before. Week 9 brought an evening when Sarah fell asleep on the couch during a movie, exhausted from maintaining her punishing schedule, full CEO responsibilities during the day, pumping every 3 hours to maintain supply nursing, Tyler every evening, sleeping maybe 4 hours a night. Marcus covered her with a blanket instead of waking her, and when morning came, she was still there, disoriented and embarrassed. "I should go. My car's been in the parking lot overnight." "It's Saturday. Stay for breakfast. Get actual sleep for once." She stayed. Marcus made pancakes while Sarah nursed Tyler in the morning light streaming through the windows, and the domesticity of it felt simultaneously right and terrifying. Like playing house with someone who might disappear the moment reality intruded. The neighbor from 3C, Mrs. Patricia Hamilton, encountered them in the hallway as Sarah was leaving. "Good morning, is this Marcus's girlfriend? So nice to meet family." Sarah froze mid-step, but Marcus recovered first. "Yes, this is Sarah. Sarah, Mrs. Hamilton." In the elevator, Sarah's panic became visible. "We just outed ourselves to your neighbor." "Mrs. Hamilton doesn't work at Apex. We're fine. For now." Week 11 brought the shift from whatever they'd been doing into something neither could deny anymore. Friday night baseball game on TV, Giants versus Dodgers. Sarah didn't understand baseball, but asked Marcus to explain, and he found himself teaching her the basics, laughing when she confused strikes with steals. Their hands touched on the sofa arm. Neither pulled away. Marcus turned toward her, his heart suddenly hammering against his ribs. "What are we doing?" Sarah's breath caught. "I don't know. This was supposed to be just about Tyler. But it's not anymore, is it?" "No, it's not." The admission hung between them for 3 heartbeats before Marcus continued, the words coming from somewhere deeper than conscious thought. "My mom thinks you're in love with me." Sarah went very still. "Your mom is perceptive. Are you—" The question emerged barely above a whisper, and Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "I've been in love with you for 3 weeks. I tried to tell myself it was just oxytocin from nursing, just hormones bonding me to Tyler's father. But that's bullshit. I love you because you let me be vulnerable. You don't expect me to be the ice queen. You let me be just Sarah." Marcus closed the distance between them, his hand finding her face. "I think I'm falling for you too, which is insane because you're my boss. You're 14 years older, and this whole situation is already complicated enough to give a therapist nightmares." Sarah kissed him, then tentative for maybe half a second before desperation took over. Weeks of repressed attraction igniting in the space between intention and action. They broke apart, breathing hard, and Sarah's laugh came out shaky. "We're terrible at this." "The worst. I should go. We need to think about what this means." "Okay, but Sarah—" "Yeah, I meant what I said. I'm falling in love with you. That's not going away just because it's complicated." She cupped his face with both hands, her expression fierce and frightened in equal measure. "Good, because I'm all in. Have been for weeks. I'm just terrified." "Me too." After Sarah left, Marcus stood at the window watching her Tesla disappear into San Francisco traffic, wondering what he'd just set in motion and whether it would save them or destroy them, or somehow manage both. Weeks 12 through 15 existed in a strange dual reality. At apex, they maintained perfect professionalism. Sarah actually harder on Marcus's team than before, overcompensating to avoid any appearance of favoritism. Marcus avoided the 20th floor, entirely structured his day to minimize any chance of running into her in common areas. But at his apartment, they built something that felt increasingly like a relationship. Sarah left a toothbrush, then a change of clothes, then her laptop and charger. They had their spot on the couch, Sarah on the left, Marcus on the right, Tyler between them, or playing on the floor. They watched Breaking Bad together, currently midway through season 3, and debated whether Walter White was villain or victim. Physical intimacy grew slowly, cautiously, kissing on the couch after Tyler slept, Sarah falling asleep against Marcus's shoulder. But they hadn't had sex, both too aware of the stakes, too conscious that crossing that final boundary would change something fundamental. David Brennan confronted Marcus during lunch in week 13, 4 years of friendship finally hitting its limit. "Okay, I've been patient, but something's going on and you won't tell me." "What the hell, man?" Marcus deflected, uncomfortable with lying but unable to tell the truth. "Nothing's going on. I'm just busy with Tyler." David's voice rose slightly, hurt bleeding through the anger. "Bullshit. You're smiling all the time. You look happy. You're clearly dating someone, and you won't even tell me her name. We've been friends for 4 years. I told you everything about my divorce, about the custody battle. You can't extend the same trust. It's complicated, work-related complications." David's eyes widened with realization. "Holy shit. You're dating someone from work. Who is it?" "I really can't talk about this. Please, Dave. Trust me." David stood his chair, scraping loudly against the cafeteria floor. "Yeah, sure, whatever. When you're ready to trust your best friend, let me know." He walked away, and Marcus felt the isolation of secrecy closing in like a vice. Every lie pushed people further away, created distance that might become permanent. Week 14 brought Maggie Sullivan to San Francisco, unannounced, her habit of appearing whenever her maternal instincts detected trouble. She showed up at Marcus's apartment on a Thursday at 6:45, pushing past the surprise on his face. "I came to see my grandson and meet this woman who's apparently feeding him." She walked in to find Sarah nursing Tyler in the rocking chair, Marcus in the kitchen cooking pot roast from Maggie's own recipe, Nora Jones playing softly from the Bluetooth speaker. The scene looked exactly like a family, and Maggie's expression said she knew it. She pulled Marcus into the bedroom, closing the door with careful precision. Baby, that woman is in love with you. You see that? Marcus couldn't deny it, didn't want to. We're involved, romantically. Maggie sat heavily on the bed. Marcus, I know it's complicated. Complicated. This is a minefield. She's your boss. She's got the money and the power. What happens when this goes bad? Because relationships will always go bad at some point. It's whether you can get through the bad that matters. I love her, Mom. Maggie studied him with eyes that had watched 3 sons grow from boys to men that could read truths they hadn't spoken yet. You've known her 4 months. I knew Keisha 4 months before I proposed. You married Dad after 6 months. Love doesn't run on a schedule. Maggie interrogated Sarah with the directness of someone who'd survived too much to waste time on politeness. Sarah met every question with honesty that bordered on brutal. Her 4 losses, her desperate need to experience motherhood, her love for both Tyler and Marcus that terrified her with its intensity. When Sarah mentioned she'd approached the board chair about hypothetically resigning to eliminate the power imbalance, Maggie's expression shifted. You're serious. You'd walk away from a $280 million company. I've walked away from 4 children. Professional success doesn't fill that void. This does. Maggie delivered her verdict before leaving the next morning. This is messy, baby, real messy. That woman's carrying grief that could drown both of you. But I see how you look at each other. That's real love. Rare love. Love doesn't show up convenient. It shows up when you're broken and exhausted and not looking for it. Sometimes it's wearing the wrong costume, wrong age, wrong job, wrong timing. But if it's real love, you don't walk away just because it's hard. You fight for it. The words stayed with Marcus through week 15, through the growing sense that their secret couldn't hold much longer, through the pressure building, like a storm system visible on satellite, but not yet arrived. Week 16 brought Tuesday morning, 7:22 a.m. Marcus woke to his phone exploding with notifications. 17 texts, 4 missed calls. Email from David with the subject line, Dude, WTF. He opened TechCrunch with hands that had started shaking. The headline punched through his half-awake brain like a fist. Ice Queen's secret Apex CEO, Sarah Whitmore, spotted at employee's residence, ethics questions mount. 3 photos loaded slowly, each one worse than the last. Sarah entering his building Monday evening, her Tesla in the parking lot, license plate clearly visible. A zoom shot through his living room window, grainy but unmistakable, Sarah and Marcus at the dinner table. The article didn't know about Tyler, didn't understand the nursing arrangement, but it didn't need accurate information to cause catastrophic damage. The speculation alone would be enough. Marcus called Sarah at 7:25. Her voice came through tight with strain. I've seen it. Board emergency meeting in at 9:30. What do? We tell the truth. All of it. Sarah, if you tell them about Tyler, about the nursing arrangement, I'm not lying anymore. The lying is what got him here. I'll call you after the board meeting. The call ended. Marcus sat on the edge of his bed, Tyler still sleeping peacefully in the crib, and watched his carefully constructed world start to collapse. By 8 a.m., Sarah's penthouse had filled with people trying to contain the damage. Ellen Martinez, her lawyer, paced near the windows, while 2 PR consultants debated crisis management strategies that all sounded equally hopeless. Ellen's voice cut through the noise. Sarah, do not tell them about the wet nursing. The optics are catastrophic. Sarah stood at the window overlooking the bay, her spine rigid. I'm not lying, Ellen. Then prepare to lose everything. The board will force you out. You'll lose $142 million in equity if they make you sell shares at discount. I don't care about the money, Tiktun. Ellen's voice rose in disbelief. You don't care about $142 million. Not as much as I care about that baby or Marcus. The board call started at 9:30 sharp. Robert Phillips, board chair at 68, with the ruthless efficiency of old-school venture capital, didn't waste time on pleasantries. Sarah, explain yourself. Sarah told them everything. The miscarriage, the spontaneous lactation, Tyler's failure to thrive, the medical supervision, the arrangement that had saved a dying baby's life. And yes, the romantic relationship that had developed despite their best efforts to maintain boundaries. 5 seconds of shocked silence followed before Robert Phillips spoke. You've been breastfeeding an employee's baby for 16 weeks while serving as CEO of this company. Yes, Linda Harper, former Google VP and the board's voice of reason, found her words next. Sarah, do you understand the liability implications? If anything happens to that child disease transmission injury, Apex could be sued into bankruptcy. I've been tested monthly, full medical clearance. This was done responsibly. Robert Phillips delivered the ultimatum with clinical precision. Option 1, terminate all personal contact with Marcus Sullivan immediately. Submit to full ethics investigation. 6 months unpaid leave. Return contingent on findings. Option 2, resign as CEO effective immediately. We'll buy back your shares at 35% discount. You lose $52 million but avoid prolonged scandal. Option 3, we terminate you for cause. You lose everything. You have 2 hours to decide. Sarah called Marcus at 11. They want me to choose. Stop seeing you and Tyler or resign and lose $52 million. Marcus was already walking. Where are you, Tom? My place. Marcus, I don't know what to do. I'm coming. Don't decide anything until I get there. He arrived at her penthouse, 30 minutes later, Tyler on his hip. The luxury of Sarah's living space, floor-to-ceiling windows furniture, that cost more than his car art he recognized from museum catalogs, felt obscene against the crisis consuming them. Don't resign yet. Sarah's laugh came out broken. If I don't, I have to end this. End us. Stop nursing Tyler. And Marcus, I can't. He's dependent on me. His body knows my milk now. Then I quit Apex, right now, today. You're not my boss anymore. Problem solved. You'll lose your income, your health insurance. Software engineers are in demand. I'll have offers by Friday, but Tyler won't find another you. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. If I resign, I do it publicly, honestly, on my terms. Then I'm standing with you. The media will destroy you. Your name will be public. Everyone will know about the nursing, about us. Marcus shifted Tyler to his other hip, his voice steady despite the fear coursing through him. A man's character is what he does when everyone's watching. Everyone's about to watch. Let them see me standing by you. Sarah stepped forward, and for the first time that day, she smiled. I love you. I love you too. Now let's go face this together. At 1 p.m., Sarah called Robert Phillips. I resign, effective immediately, but I'm making a public statement, full transparency. Sarah, I'd strongly advise. I wasn't asking for permission, Robert. I'm informing you. At 2 p.m., Sarah convened an emergency all-hands meeting via Zoom. 800 employees logged on expecting crisis management, corporate spin damage control. What they got was raw truth. Sarah spoke from her penthouse office, the bay visible behind her, her expression calm, despite everything crumbling. Good afternoon. Many of you have seen the TechCrunch article. I believe you deserve the complete truth. 16 weeks ago, I lost my daughter Emma to miscarriage at 18 weeks. This was my 4th pregnancy loss. Despite this, my body produced milk for a baby I would never feed. At the same time, Marcus Sullivan was watching his infant son Tyler slowly starve. Tyler's mother died during childbirth. He rejected all formula due to severe medical issues, dropped to 5th percentile for weight-faced hospitalization. When I held Tyler, my body responded with spontaneous lactation. Tyler nursed for the first time in his life. For 16 weeks, I have served as wet nurse to Tyler Sullivan under full medical supervision. Tyler went from 5th percentile to 47th percentile. This arrangement saved his life. Yes, there is now a romantic relationship between Marcus and myself. We did not intend this. We tried to maintain boundaries. We failed. The board has given me an ultimatum: end all contact with Marcus and Tyler, or resign. I choose Tyler. I choose Marcus. I am resigning as CEO effective immediately. I have built this company from 2 million to 280 million. I am proud of that. But nursing Tyler has meant more to me than every quarterly earnings call, every acquisition, every board meeting. Because at the end of my life, I will not remember our stock price. I will remember a baby who needed me, and I had the biological capacity to help him survive. Marcus Sullivan is a devoted father who made a desperate choice to save his child. He is not a victim. To those who will judge us, I understand. This crosses boundaries. But so does watching a baby starve when you have the ability to feed them. I will not apologize for feeding a hungry child. Thank you for 12 years. Sarah ended the Zoom. Within 5 minutes, TechCrunch updated their article. Twitter exploded. Wall Street Journal, New York Times, Washington Post all picked up the story. Conservative media screamed about inappropriate relationships. Progressive outlets called it a modern love story. Medical journals debated wet nursing practices. Marcus's phone hit 47 LinkedIn messages from journalists by 2:15. At Marcus's apartment that evening, they sat on the couch with Tyler between them, watching their lives become public property in real time. Sarah's voice came out hollow. I just lost $52 million. Marcus tried for lightness and almost succeeded. And we just became the most famous couple in America. Sarah laughed, the sound catching on a sob. What have we done? Survived together. Tyler looked up at Sarah, his face breaking into a smile. Mama, clear as day. His first real word directed at her with perfect understanding. They both started crying. Marcus pulled Sarah close. Tyler squeezed between them and let the chaos of the outside world fade to white noise. Tomorrow would bring consequences they couldn't predict. Scrutiny they couldn't avoid, judgment they couldn't escape. But tonight they had each other. They had Tyler. They had chosen honesty over comfort, love over money, family over reputation. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The city lights of San Francisco glittered through the window like stars, indifferent to the small drama playing out in a Mission District apartment. Somewhere in the distance, sirens wailed. Life continued its relentless forward motion, carrying them along, whether they were ready or not. Sarah whispered against Marcus's shoulder. Now we find out if love is enough when the whole world is watching. Marcus tightened his arms around her, and Tyler both holding on to the only certainties he had left. Then we better hold on tight. Wednesday morning arrived with 15 photographers camped outside Marcus's building, their lenses tracking every movement like predators waiting for prey. 3 news vans had claimed parking spots on the street: ABC, 7, NBC, Bay Area, KPIX. Their satellite dishes extended toward a sky that promised rain, but hadn't delivered yet. Marcus stood at his window, watching the circus assemble below Tyler, balanced on his hip, babbling sounds that might eventually become words. The baby remained blissfully unaware that his face would soon be plastered across every news site in America, that his feeding arrangement had become fodder for think pieces and hot takes in social media outrage. Sarah had texted at 6 a.m. from her own besieged building. Can't leave penthouse. Paparazzi blocking garage exit. Staying put today. Miss you both. The isolation hit harder than Marcus expected. 24 hours ago, Sarah had been showing up at his door every evening like clockwork. Now she was trapped 3 miles away, and the routine that had sustained them for 16 weeks had shattered like glass. Marcus took unpaid leave from Apex via email at 6:30, avoiding the humiliation of walking through the office while 800 employees discussed his personal life. David Brennan called twice. Marcus let it go to voicemail both times, unable to face the conversation that friendship probably required, but exhaustion couldn't accommodate. The media coverage split along predictable fault lines. Fox News ran segments about inappropriate workplace relationships and power imbalances, their legal analysts debating whether Sarah's actions constituted some form of exploitation. MSNBC framed it as a woman sacrificing fortune for motherhood, their hosts praising Sarah's choice while carefully avoiding the wet nursing details that made suburban viewers uncomfortable. But social media told a different story. Twitter had exploded overnight with hashtag wet nursing scandal trending #1 globally, and beneath the predictable outrage, something unexpected was growing. Mothers sharing stories Marcus hadn't known existed. Sisters nursing each other's babies during illness. Friends cross-nursing when supply issues arose. Grandmothers talking about wet nursing as normal practice in their youth, before formula companies convinced America it was strange. One Facebook post shared 47,000 times by Wednesday afternoon came from a woman in Oakland. My sister wet nursed my daughter when I had breast cancer and couldn't produce milk. This saved her life. Wet nursing used to be normal before formula companies turned it into something shameful. What Sarah Whitmore did is beautiful. Thursday brought Maggie Sullivan back to San Francisco, her heart condition stable enough on medication that her cardiologist had cleared the flight with reluctant approval. She pushed through the photographers outside Marcus's building with Baltimore toughness that made one cameraman actually step back. "You want to comment? My grandson was dying. That woman saved him. Now move before I make you." Inside the apartment, Maggie took one look at Sarah, who'd managed to escape her building through a service entrance, and was now curled on Marcus's couch, looking smaller than her CEO bearing usually allowed, and pulled her into a hug that lasted 30 seconds. "Thank you for saving my grandson. Thank you for loving him enough to give up everything." Sarah's voice came out muffled against Maggie's shoulder. "I didn't give up everything. I got a family." Maggie pulled back, studying Sarah's face with the directness of someone who'd spent 37 years as a labor and delivery nurse, who'd seen every variation of maternal love and loss. "You lost $52 million. You telling me you're not upset about that?" Sarah looked at Tyler playing on the floor with his blocks, then at Marcus standing in the kitchen doorway. "Mrs. Sullivan, I spent $427,000 over 6 years trying to buy motherhood through IVF. I failed every single time. Turns out I could have spent $52 million and it still would have been worth it to hear that baby call me mama." The statement hung in the air and Maggie's expression softened into something that looked like acceptance. "You're either crazy or the bravest woman I've ever met. Maybe both." Friday brought the financial reckoning in Ellen Martinez's office downtown, a glass tower that made Apex's headquarters look modest. Sarah sat across from her lawyer and financial advisor, James Patterson, reviewing documents that quantified her professional destruction in precise dollar amounts. James walked through the numbers with the detached professionalism of someone delivering terminal diagnoses. "The board executed share buyback at 35% discount. Your shares worth $142 million is sold for $89.7 million. After capital gains taxes, California plus federal, you'll net approximately $68 million liquid. Your penthouse is worth $8.5 million. Investment portfolios adds another 4.2. Savings and checking accounts total 1.8. Your net worth is approximately $82.5 million. Sarah absorbed the information without visible reaction, her CEO training serving her even in defeat. "So I'm still wealthy?" James's eyebrows rose. "Most people would be devastated at losing $52 million. Well, most people did not spend 6 years watching their bodies kill 4 babies. Money can't buy the sound of a child calling you mama. It can't buy waking up next to someone who loves you for who you are, not what you're worth. I'd do it again. I'd lose $500 million if it meant having what I have now." The statement clearly baffled James, but Ellen nodded slowly, perhaps understanding something her financial counterpart couldn't grasp, that some currencies mattered more than the ones printed by the Federal Reserve. Saturday morning brought Marcus's own sacrifice, though he'd been planning it since Tuesday night. He called Brian Walsh, his old startup co-founder, at 7 a.m. Pacific time, knowing Brian kept East Coast hours despite living in Seattle. "I need to liquidate my Microsoft stock. All of it." Brian's voice carried confusion and concern in equal measure. "Marcus, that's $1.6 million. That's Tyler's college fund. Are you insane? Sarah just lost $52 million for Tyler. This is the least I can do." "You're going to give a multi-millionaire more money." Marcus watched Tyler sleeping in his crib, the baby's chest rising and falling with the steady rhythm of health they'd fought so hard to achieve. "I'm not giving it to her. I'm contributing to us. We're building a life together. This is my stake in it." Brian's sigh carried 3,000 miles of resigned acceptance. "You're stupid in love, aren't you?" "Completely." "Fine, I'll process the liquidation Monday. But Marcus, you're betting everything on this woman. I hope to God she's worth it." Monday afternoon, Sarah's phone buzzed with a bank notification. "Wire transfer $1,600,000 from Marcus J. Sullivan." She called him immediately, her voice sharp with anger that masked something deeper. "What did you just do?" "You lost $52 million for Tyler. I'm contributing what I have." "Marcus, that's Tyler's college fund. His future." His voice stayed steady despite the magnitude of what he'd just done. "Tyler's future is having 2 parents who love him, not money sitting in some investment account. My dad told me something before he died: wealth isn't what's in your bank account. It's Who would walk through fire for you and who you'd walk through fire for? You walked through fire for us. This is me walking back. Sarah went quiet for 10 seconds before speaking again. I love you. I love you too. Now let's figure out what we're building with this. Week 3 after the scandal brought the interview request that would change everything. CBS Sunday Morning reached out through Ellen asking for a sit-down with Jane Pauley, the veteran journalist whose empathetic but probing style had made her a trusted voice for older Americans. Marcus and Sarah debated it over dinner at the No Valley house Sarah had purchased 2 weeks earlier. 3 bedrooms, good schools, a neighborhood where families actually lived instead of tech millionaires, warehousing investment properties. Do we do this or wait for it to die down? Sarah pushed food around her plate, barely eating, despite the Italian takeout Marcus had ordered from the place she liked. It won't die down, not without our input. Right now, everyone's writing their own narrative, filling in blanks with speculation. We need to control our story. Which outlet? CBS Sunday Morning, Jane Pauley, older demographic, people who might actually remember when wet nursing was normal practice. Respectable journalism, not ambush questions. They scheduled it for 3 weeks out, giving Tyler time to turn 11 months in the media frenzy time to reach a sustainable simmer instead of a rolling boil. The taping happened on a Saturday at a CBS studio in San Francisco, lights positioned to create warmth instead of the harsh interrogation feel of breaking news coverage. Tyler played on a mat between Marcus and Sarah while cameras rolled his presence, both shield and vulnerability, evidence of what they protected and what they risked exposing. Jane Pauley, 76 years old, with the kind eyes of someone who'd interviewed presidents and grieving mothers with equal compassion, started with the question everyone wanted answered. Sarah, you were CEO of a $280 million company. You gave that up for a baby who isn't biologically yours. Do you have any regrets? Sarah looked at Tyler before answering, her voice steady despite the tears forming. Jane, I spent 6 years and $427,000 trying to create a biological child through IVF, 4 pregnancies that ended in loss. I built a company thinking professional achievement would fill the void left by babies who died before I could hold them. She paused, composing herself. The first time Tyler latched onto me and nursed, I felt something I'd been chasing for 6 years, being needed by someone who doesn't care about my bank account or my title or my achievements. He just needed milk, and my broken body could finally give someone something they desperately needed. Jane's follow-up cut to the financial reality. You lost $52 million. That doesn't hurt. Of course it hurts, but I'd rather have Tyler call me mama than have $52 million in a bank account I can't take to my grave. Some things don't have a price tag. Jane turned to Marcus, her expression sympathetic but unflinching. Some critics say Sarah groomed you, that the power imbalance made real consent impossible. You were her subordinate employee. She's 14 years older. She had all the power. How do you respond? Marcus leaned forward, his intensity visible in the tight set of his shoulders. With respect to critics who weren't there, they didn't watch their son drop from 25th percentile to 5th percentile over 6 months. They didn't try 4 different formulas and watch their baby reject every single one. They didn't get the call from the pediatrician saying hospitalization and feeding tube if this doesn't improve within a week. His voice strengthened. Sarah saved my son's life, not metaphorically, literally. Dr. Morrison, Tyler's pediatrician, will testify that Tyler was days away from hospitalization when Sarah started nursing him. Did we fall in love? Yes. Was it complicated? Absolutely. But grooming, abuse of power, numb. This was 2 broken people helping each other survive. Jane's next question went straight to the heart of the controversy. Sarah, do you consider yourself Tyler's mother? The clip that would go viral, 17 million views in 48 hours, started here. Sarah's tears came immediately, her voice breaking. Keisha Sullivan is Tyler's mother. She carried him for 9 months. She died so he could live. I will never take that away from her. She looked down at Tyler, who had toddled over and was now hugging her leg. But I get to feed him every day. I get to rock him to sleep. I get to hear him call me Mama Sarah. Keisha gave him life. I'm just incredibly honored to help him live it. Tyler chose that moment to look up at the camera and say, clear as a bell, Mama. The crew later said you could hear the collective intake of breath from everyone in the studio. Jane Pauley's eyes watered. The moment captured something ineffable about love and family that transcended biology. The interview aired Sunday at 9 a.m. Eastern Time and exploded across every platform by 10. 17 million YouTube views in 2 days, 89,000 Facebook shares. The clip of Tyler saying mama became an instant meme, though most people used it to express genuine emotion rather than irony. Public opinion shifted dramatically. Comment sections that had been 70% critical before the interview flipped to 70% supportive after. Mothers who'd been silent about their own wet nursing experiences started speaking up, creating permission structures for conversations that had been stigmatized into silence. Dr. Morrison gave an interview to Pediatrics Today that medical professionals quoted for months afterward. In 35 years of practice, I've never seen a failure to thrive case resolve as dramatically as Tyler Sullivan's. Wet nursing is medically sound, historically normal, and should be destigmatized. This case demonstrates the life-saving potential of human milk sharing. The American Academy of Pediatrics issued a statement that became a turning point in medical policy discussions. While wet nursing requires appropriate medical screening, it is a safe practice when donors are healthy. This case demonstrates the need for healthcare providers to discuss all feeding options with struggling families. 4 days after the interview aired, an email arrived from Dr. Lisa Harper at Oakland Children's Hospital. Ms. Whitmore, since your CBS interview, our hospital has received 312 calls from mothers asking about wet nursing, milk sharing, and cross-nursing arrangements. We've connected 47 babies with feeding difficulties to lactating mothers who offered to help. 6 babies who are on track for feeding tubes are now thriving on donated breast milk. Your story gave families permission to ask for help. Would you speak at our pediatric nutrition conference in March? Sarah showed Marcus the email that evening while Tyler played with the blocks on the living room floor of their new house. Our story is giving other families permission to survive. Marcus wrapped his arm around her shoulders, pulling her close. Then maybe all of this was worth it. Month 5 brought the official launch of Emma's Legacy Foundation, funded by the combined resources they'd committed. Sarah's 10 million, Marcus's 1.6 million, 6.8 million, raised through GoFundMe from people inspired by the CBS interview, and 3.2 million in corporate matching from tech companies trying to demonstrate social responsibility. 21.8 million total. More than Sarah had dared hope for, less than she'd lost, but enough to create real impact. The foundation's mission crystallized around 4 pillars: funding milk banks across California, supporting wet nursing matching programs with free screening and legal documentation, providing $15,000 IVF grants to low-income families, and offering completely free pregnancy loss counseling. Sarah worked 50 hours a week as unpaid executive director, channeling her perfectionist tendencies into helping others instead of destroying herself. Board meetings felt different when the metrics measured babies saved instead of quarterly revenue. Marcus's job search took 4 weeks. 12 companies interviewed him, 8 made offers, but most came in $20,000 to $30,000 below his apex salary due to what one recruiter delicately called the publicity complications. 2 companies offered more than he'd been making. Stripe dangled $160,000 plus equity, but required 60-hour weeks and heavy travel. TechFlow Solutions, a 35-person startup, offered $125,000 plus 2% equity with a CEO who'd been through his own fertility struggles. James Mitchell conducted the final interview in a coffee shop instead of an office, his approach immediately different from the corporate formality Marcus had grown accustomed to. Marcus, my wife and I had twins through IVF after 5 years of trying. 3 miscarriages before the pregnancy that stuck. I understand sacrifice for children. What you and Sarah did took guts. He slid the offer letter across the table. We can't pay Stripe money, but you'll work 9 to 5:30, no weekends, and we're 2 miles from your house. You can see Tyler every lunch break if you want. Marcus accepted before leaving the coffee shop, the decision easier than he'd expected, because somewhere along the way, his definition of success had shifted from maximizing salary to maximizing time with the people who made life worth living. Month 7 brought Sarah's penthouse sale at $8.2 million, slightly below asking because the market had cooled and the buyer knew Sarah needed to move quickly. The money funded their rebuilding: $2.4 million for the Noe Valley house, $2 million donated to the foundation, $1.5 million into an education trust for Tyler managed by James Patterson, and $2.3 million kept liquid for living expenses. The Noe Valley house felt nothing like Sarah's sterile penthouse. 3 bedrooms meant space for everyone. Master bedroom with morning light that woke them gently, Tyler's nursery decorated with whales and sailing ships guest room, permanently ready for Maggie's monthly visits. The neighborhood hummed with actual families instead of investment properties sitting empty. Kids rode bikes on the sidewalk. Parents pushed strollers to the farmer's market on Saturdays. Tyler had playmates within walking distance instead of the isolated luxury Sarah had inhabited for years. David Brennan reconciled with Marcus over beers at a Mission District bar in month 8, 4 years of friendship, proving stronger than 3 months of hurt feelings. I'm sorry I shut you out. I couldn't tell you without exposing Sarah, and I didn't know how to explain that. David took a long pull from his IPA before responding. I get it now, after seeing the interview, understanding what was at stake. Still hurt like hell at the time, though. I know. I'm sorry. You're forgiven. But man, you realize you're the most famous wet nursing advocate in America now. My daughter's teacher asked if I knew you. That's surreal. Month 9 brought Tyler's 17th month and the natural conclusion they'd known was coming, but hadn't discussed. Sarah's milk supply had been decreasing gradually from 28 ounces per day down to 5 or 6, her body slowly recognizing that the biological need had passed. Tyler was eating solid foods enthusiastically, his favorite being blueberries and macaroni and cheese and chicken nuggets shaped like dinosaurs. Whole milk from the refrigerator replaced most of his breast milk intake, his gut finally mature enough to handle dairy without the rejection that had defined his early months. The nursing had reduced to once per day bedtime, only more comfort than nutrition at this point. One Thursday evening during the usual bedtime routine, Sarah settled into the rocking chair they'd brought from Marcus's apartment. Tyler nursed for maybe 10 minutes before pulling off and looking up with the serious expression he wore when making important announcements. All done, Mama. I big boy. Sarah understood immediately what he meant, what this moment represented. Her voice stayed steady even as tears began. Yes, sweetheart, you're such a big boy. Tyler considered this, then asked with the directness of toddler logic. No more milk. No more milk from Mama Sarah, but you can have milk from the fridge like Dada drinks. Tyler processed this for 3 seconds before his face brightened. Okay. He jumped down and ran to play with his trucks, the transition completed with the easy acceptance of someone who didn't understand he'd just ended a chapter that had saved his life and built his family. Sarah sat in the rocking chair crying silently while Marcus stood in the doorway having heard the exchange. He crossed the room and knelt beside the chair, taking her hands. Hey, what's wrong? Her voice came out broken. He doesn't need me anymore. That was the last time. My body is useless again. Marcus squeezed her hands, making her look at him. You know what Tyler needs now? A mom who teaches him to read, who takes him to the park, who shows up to his preschool performances, who helps with homework and teaches him right from wrong. Sarah started to respond, but Marcus continued. Biology got him through infancy. Motherhood is what happens for the next 17 years. And you're perfect for that job. The words landed like absolution for sins she hadn't committed permission to be more than the biological function that had defined her worth for so long. You really think so? I know so. I see how you are with him every day. That's not biology, that's love. Marcus stood suddenly, and Sarah's confusion lasted only until he returned from the bedroom holding a small navy blue box. He knelt properly, the box opened to reveal a simple diamond ring, 1.2 carats, $15,000, significant for him, but not flashy. Sarah Margaret Whitmore, I bought this ring 6 weeks ago. I've been waiting for the perfect moment, but I realize every moment with you is perfect. His voice steadied as he found the words he'd been rehearsing for weeks. You gave up $52 million for my son. You fed him every single day for 9 months when his body was failing. You loved us when we were broken beyond repair. You've given me a reason to wake up in every morning. You've given Tyler a mother who loves him as fiercely as if she'd carried him herself. Will you marry me? Will you make this official? Sarah's hands went to her mouth, fresh tears replacing the ones that had barely dried. Marcus, you know I can't have children. I'm 43 years old. My body killed 4 babies. If you want more kids, he interrupted gently but firmly. We have Tyler. If you want more kids, we adopt. If you don't, that's fine too. I'm not marrying you for future babies. I'm marrying you because I love you. The woman who cries during Pixar movies and makes terrible jokes and burns toast every single morning and loves my son like he's yours. That's who I'm marrying. His final words carried the weight of certainty earned through crisis. You spent 6 years trying to build a family through fertility treatments. I'm asking you to join the family we've already built. Say yes. Sarah nodded through tears, unable to speak for 5 seconds before finding her voice. Yes, God, yes. 1,000 times yes. Marcus slid the ring onto her finger, and they kissed while Tyler, oblivious to the magnitude of the moment, crashed toy trucks together, making explosion sounds. The baby looked up and saw them kissing. Dada, mama hug. He wrapped his arms around both their legs, and they sank to the floor in a three-person embrace that felt like coming home after a journey none of them had chosen but all had survived. Tyler pulled back and announced with the authority of a toddler who just learned family dynamics. We family. Marcus tightened his arms around Sarah and Tyler both. Yes, buddy, we're family. 18 months later, San Francisco City Hall hosted 40 guests for a wedding that made local news despite being deliberately modest. Maggie Sullivan sat front row with tissues already in hand. David Brennan stood as best man. Dr. Morrison attended with his wife. James Mitchell brought his family. Jessica Parker came with her husband. Ashley Rodriguez, the Oakland mother whose daughter Sophia had been saved by wet nursing after Sarah's story inspired her to ask for help, sat 3 rows back with Sophia, now healthy and thriving. 15 mothers from foundation support groups filled the middle section, all pregnancy loss survivors who'd found community through Emma's legacy. Sarah's brother Michael had flown in from Detroit, their relationship rebuilt through phone calls that gradually thawed years of distance. Tyler, now 3 years old and wearing a tiny suit, carried the ring pillow down the aisle. His pants were too long. He tripped. David caught him. Everyone laughed with the genuine warmth of people who'd chosen to witness love instead of judge it. Judge Patricia Walsh, 62 years old with the warm authority of someone who'd married hundreds of couples, began with acknowledgement of their journey. Marcus and Sarah, you've walked through fire to get here. Public scandal, financial loss, personal grief, but you've emerged stronger together. Marcus's vows came first, his voice steady despite the emotion threatening to overwhelm him. Sarah, when Keisha died, I thought my capacity to love died with her. Then you walked into my life. Or more accurately, I walked in on you feeding my son. The guests laughed, the tension breaking. You fed Tyler when I couldn't. You saved his life. You loved us when we were too broken to love ourselves. You sacrificed $52 million in your career. I promise to spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret it. I promise to be the husband you deserve, the father Tyler needs, the partner you can count on when the world gets hard again, because it will. You gave me back my life. I give you mine in return. Sarah's vows shook slightly as she began, but strengthened as she found her rhythm. Marcus, I buried 4 babies in 6 years. Noah, Grace, Hannah, Emma. I thought I was being punished for something I couldn't identify. She looked at Tyler, standing with David. Then I met your son. Tyler taught me that motherhood isn't about biology or genetics or carrying a baby for 9 months. It's about showing up every single day, feeding, comforting, loving someone more than you love yourself. She turned back to Marcus, tears flowing freely. You gave me permission to be Tyler's mother when you didn't have to. You could have said no, found another solution, rejected this arrangement. But you trusted me with the most precious thing in your life. That's the greatest gift anyone has ever given me. I promise to honor that trust, to love Tyler as fiercely as if I'd given birth to him, to love you with everything I have left after 6 years of grief stole most of me away. You gave me back my life. I give you mine forever. The judge pronounced them married. They kissed, and Tyler squealed loud enough that several guests in the back row heard him clearly. Dada married Mama. The reception at a small Italian restaurant in North Beach felt more like a family dinner than a formal celebration. Maggie's toast brought everyone to tears. I'm 60 years old. I've been a labor and delivery nurse for 37 years. I've seen every variation of family you can imagine. When Marcus first told me about Sarah, I thought he'd lost his mind. I came to San Francisco ready to protect him from whatever scheme was happening. She looked directly at Sarah. But you weren't running a scheme. You were barely surviving. Two broken people who found each other when they needed it most. Keisha Sullivan gave Tyler life. She died so he could live. We will never forget her. But Sarah, you gave Tyler survival. You gave him the chance to thrive. You gave him a mother who shows up every single day. Welcome to the family, daughter. Ashley Rodriguez spoke next, holding Sophia's hand. Sarah, when Sophia was failing to thrive, your CBS interview gave me permission to ask my sister for help. She said yes. Sophia gained 12 ounces in 1 week. Your story saved my daughter by making wet nursing normal again. Thank you. The first dance happened with Tyler squeezed between them, stepping on both their feet, giggling at the absurdity of formal dancing. Neither Marcus nor Sarah cared about the disruption. They held each other and their son and let the outside world fade to irrelevance. Later that evening, after guests had left and Tyler had fallen asleep in Sarah's arms during the car ride home, Marcus and Sarah stood in the living room of their Noe Valley house. The mantel held 3 photographs arranged like a timeline. Keisha holding newborn Tyler Hospital 2024, captioned in Sarah's handwriting, Keisha Sullivan, 1998 to 2024, Tyler's first mother. Sarah nursing 2-month-old Tyler. Marcus had taken the photo in 2025, both of them looking peaceful in the rocking chair that now sat in Tyler's room. Wedding photo from earlier today, all 3 holding hands laughing at something Tyler had said during the ceremony. Marcus pulled Sarah close while they looked at the photos. Do you ever regret it, losing Apex the money, the CEO title? Sarah leaned into him, her voice carrying the certainty of someone who'd found what they'd been searching for without knowing what they needed. I spent 6 years chasing biological motherhood, 12 years building a company. I thought those things would give my life meaning, but every night I tuck Tyler into bed. He calls me mama. He knows I fed him when he was dying. In 50 years, no one will remember Apex Systems. But Tyler will remember that 2 women loved him enough to sacrifice everything for him, so no, I don't regret a single thing. Marcus kissed her, the gesture carrying 6 years of shared history compressed into simple affection. Good, because you're stuck with us forever now. Best life sentence I ever got. Outside, San Francisco stretched toward the Pacific, its lights creating constellations that rivaled the stars above. Somewhere in the city, another mother struggled with feeding difficulties. Another woman grieved a pregnancy that ended too soon. Another family tried to survive circumstances that felt insurmountable. Emma's Legacy Foundation would be there Monday morning, ready to help, funded by the choice 2 people had made to choose love over money, honesty over comfort, family over reputation. The story that had begun with a shock discovery in a 20th floor break room had become something larger than its participants. Permission for others to seek help. Evidence that family transcended biology. Proof that sometimes the right choice looked nothing like anyone expected. Tyler stirred in his sleep on the couch where Sarah had laid him, made a small sound, then settled back into dreams populated by trucks and dinosaurs and the absolute certainty that he was loved. Marcus and Sarah stood together looking at the photographs that told their story in images instead of words. 3 chapters. 3 people. 1 family built from broken pieces that had somehow fit together when nothing else would. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, but they'd face it together, holding on to each other and the small boy who'd brought them together through his desperate need and their willingness to answer it. Some stories don't have tidy endings. This one had something better. It had continuation, the daily choice to keep showing up, keep loving, keep building something worth more than any bank balance could measure. Everyone was safe. Everyone was fed. Everyone was loved. And in the end, that was everything.